Hi, everyone, and welcome to the interview on financial literacy. This is a research study that is funded by the Stellar Development Foundation. I am Dr. Justin Goldston. I am a professor at Penn State University, as well as an advisory board member for Georgetown University. I'm a 5-time TEDx speaker in 2019 in blockchain in the last bear market. And if you go to TED.com and type in Justin Goldston, you'll see a number of those use cases that I talked about in 2019 were actually implemented in 2022. So without further ado, we have Tayler McCracken from Coin Bureau, but I'll stop and I'll let him introduce himself. Tyler?
Yeah, thanks, Justin. Boy, I sure wish I could match those accolades, but I guess I'll give a little bit about me. So I first made my foray into crypto back in about 2018-19, worked as a support engineer for a crypto company. So it was interesting for a while, got to kind of learn a lot, get my feet wet. And then I got to go into a control analyst for another crypto company, which was cool, and got into a bit of blockchain investigation. So that was a bit of a sad job, basically investigating people who had lost crypto. And as you know, crypto is often a one-way transaction. Once it's gone, probably not getting it back. So that was unfortunate, but yes, moving to modern day, I am now a researcher for the Coin Bureau, and I'm also their editor-in-chief, I guess you'd call it. So I'm the man that runs the website. So been working with Coin Bureau for about 2 years, and yeah, love it. Just happy to be in crypto.
All right, thank you for that. So I want to get your thoughts on how, two-part question. I want to get your thoughts on how gamification on the blockchain could lead to increased financial literacy to those around the world. And then also, how do you think that game-based learning could lead to increased financial literacy around the world?
I think gamification of just about anything is a good idea when you're trying to promote, learning especially, but it's been shown that an instant feedback reward mechanism is very motivational for learning. So I think one of the issues with the traditional style of learning, say if you're, joining primary school or high school, it's like, if you work really hard now, you can get a good career 10 years from now. That's not instant gratification, is it? It's a bit too far in the future for kids to really kind of conceptualize. So I think by being able to gamify it, it's the same reason why video games are so addictive, right? You can get these little upgrades, and if you do well and you can pass these missions and you kind of get that instant feedback sense of accomplishment for doing something, and you can get rewarded by something, right? So I think gamification in that sense, it's a really good motivator, and I think it's a really good idea as well. I know for me personally, so I went to university in my 30s in a different country. So I'm from Canada originally, studied there. And I found it kind of funny, before they would accept me into university in a new country, I had to basically retake their high school level course. And I was like, oh, so I had to do like grade 12 biology again and grade 12 math and other stuff. And I had these textbooks, and I'm reading, and I must have read the same textbook. I was like, man, there's got to be a better way. And I was like, well, of course, the internet, I wish I would have got more into it when I was in high school. But yeah, so I found this really silly game that you're going through like the human body with biology, and you're kind of like going through the cells, and there's these different little missions. And not to toot my own horn, but I ended up scoring over 90% in all my courses, which was far better than I did actually in high school. And it's because I'd used gamification techniques, and well, YouTube was a savior as well. But yeah, I think that's brilliant. And by doing it on the blockchain, one thing I think is really cool is that's now permanent. So your achievements and your accolades are now there forever. So I can't lie to you and be like, hey, I studied at, some prestigious school. I'm like, you can actually, and I don't even have to tell you anything. You can go in and you can verify it for yourself if it's on the blockchain. So yeah, I can't think of a better way to teach financial literacy. And especially because I think there's a huge use case for that as well. Like I feel that our schools have severely let us down when it comes to financial literacy. So I'd like to go on a rant on that in a second, but I'll do that in a minute. Let's hear another question. Did I answer those two well enough?
Yes. So I want to. So you did answer those questions, but I'm anxious to hear this rant. So you can go ahead. You can go ahead with that one because I got some notes, but I want to hear this rant.
Okay, so I shouldn't really say it's not as much as a rant, other than I'm just going to be talking at you for the next few minutes. But it's more of an observation that I've had, and this is something that I really like this, but I think it might be a bit of a double-edged blade, and it's how crypto, I believe, has actually increased financial literacy. So I was writing an article on whether or not Bitcoin could ever become the next world reserve currency. And I ended up falling down this rabbit hole, don't even know how I found it, about how Gen Z and millennials are far more financially literate today than that age group was in previous generations. And there are a few reasons for that. Obviously, they have access to more information. We can invest in stocks directly from our phones. But I honestly believe that the biggest reason for this is because of cryptocurrency. And the reason for that is, well, first of all, it's quite outstanding when you go on like YouTube and Twitter. There are, not to be ageist, but there are like 18 and 19-year-old kids on there, and they're deep diving into macro, analysis. They're talking about interest rates, monetary, fiscal policy. And I was like, man, when I was 19, my friends and I were talking about what beer we liked and what video games we were playing. I was like, I knew nothing about this stuff. And now all of a sudden I'm talking to an 18-year-old kid about the Fed chairman and how interest rates are affecting different assets and spending power and things like that. And I think the core reason for this is because before Bitcoin, we only had our national fiat currency. In the States, you only had the dollar. In Canada, whatever, euro, whatever your currency is. And money is a tool. And when you only have one tool, you're not really too concerned with what's happening at the higher levels, because your tool isn't going to change. Your dollar is still a dollar, regardless of what's going on in the higher echelons of governments. I kind of relate it to like when you're in the forest and you need to build a shelter and you have a hammer and you have nails. You're going to use that hammer and you're going to use those nails to build yourself a shelter. You're not going to start thinking about alternative forms of hammers. You're going to use what you got. So when you got the dollar, you use the dollar. Now, say you stumble across somebody else in the forest and he's built a shelter that's different to yours, and he's used a hammer that's different to yours. Now, all of a sudden, you've got something to compare your tool to, and you've got this other hammer. And now you're going to start weighing up the pros and cons. Like, well, is this one better in situation A? This one's better in situation B? What are the pros and cons of each? And now you're going to start realizing that each have their strengths and weaknesses. So as soon as Bitcoin came along, now all of a sudden, for the first time in history, we had very easy, instantaneous access to a competitor to the dollar, to our fiat system. So now all of a sudden, I think people started looking at this other asset class and they're like, well, wait a minute. And now all of a sudden there's competition. We know that competition breeds innovation. So now all of a sudden you've got these two things to look at and you're like, well, which one's better? Which one's worse? In what kind of situations? And now all of a sudden you're faced with the decision, like, well, should I have my money in this or should I have my money in that? And that's when you kind of start looking at how are these going to be impacted differently. So now what I find amazing today is people are more concerned with what's going on with, interest rates and inflation and all these different economic incentives and fiscal policy, because it's now, we don't have to be subject to it anymore. We kind of have an option to get out of that system. So I find it really amazing. And if you're ever really bored, you can actually live stream Jerome Powell's speeches. And I have listened to his last few. And one thing that really amazed me is I was live streaming it, and there were thousands of people watching. And I was listening to a podcast from these two bankers, and they're discussing just how things have changed now. And 10 years ago, nobody outside of Wall Street could have told you who the Fed chairman was. Now everybody knows it's, Jerome Powell. Everybody, you just talk about it as if he's some celebrity. And again, 10 years ago, you wouldn't be live streaming these interest rate choices. People wouldn't be talking about it on YouTube. So yeah, I think an honest byproduct of crypto has been increased financial literacy. Absolutely.
That was an amazing answer, because you hit the nail on the head in that, we talk about that. My students. So after Jerome Powell kind of comes on stage and makes his announcement, like the next day, my students will come in and they'll talk about it, right? Like you said, whenever I was an undergrad, even when I was in my master's program, we weren't talking about this type of stuff, right?
No.
And because the response of what Jerome Powell will say controls the price of Bitcoin, the price of Ethereum, the price of pretty much the whole entire crypto market, right? These young investors, they're actually tuned in just like we adults are, right? These older crypto heads are, right? So you make an excellent point. I actually never really seen it that way. I never really looked at it that way. And you make another great point in that, crypto has increased financial literacy in that it teaches people about yield, right? About interest rates, because you can borrow or you can actually loan out your cryptocurrencies, where beforehand nobody was ever doing that. And the thing is, you don't have to have anyone's permission to borrow or loan certain things out. So yeah, to your point, I think that DeFi has had a significant impact into financial literacy. Now, I don't think
Absolutely.
these are my thoughts. These are my thoughts. There is no research out there, because I think that this space is very nascent, is very new. But I think that it'll be very interesting to see where the research goes from an academic perspective in terms of how this asset has led to financial literacy. And I think you're going to be a part of that. I think you'll be a part of that in researchers understanding what were one of the key contributors to that.
Yeah, well, I think it really got supercharged as well with Ethereum, without a doubt, because if you think about the dollar and Bitcoin controlling purchasing power, that's not as a direct translation into, with Ethereum, this is now directly contributing to people's gaming experiences and their metaverse experiences online, right? So now people are watching these things like interest rates and fluctuations like a hawk, because now like money has never moved with such a fast velocity as it does now online. So I think people are now, they're looking like, what's that perfect minute where I can swap my, my dollars for Ethereum. And now that's going to translate into, now I can afford X number of NFTs, or, it's going to impact this metaverse or this game. Earlier, I did mention that I do think it's a double-edged sword, though. So I do love to see that people are taking more of an interest in their financial education, because it's something that's sorely lacking in our societies. But there's also the huge problem of like quasi-economics, or what I refer to as like armchair economics. And I admit that I'm guilty of this myself. It's a lot of people are watching 2 YouTube videos on interest rates, and now they think they know everything about economics, or they're making really highly impactful investment decisions with half-cocked understanding and research, right? So there are a lot of these these macro analysts, I use the term loosely, that I'll watch on YouTube. And after 20 minutes, I was like, this guy's like, he's read one article and now he's trying to educate people on things, right? And I'm like, his audience, these people are making serious investment decisions with like limited knowledge, thinking that all of a sudden they're experts. So I think it's quite dangerous in that regard as well. And after years ago, I was a financial advisor, and then I got into day trading and stock trading myself. And one of the pieces of advice, well, not advice, because I can't legally give financial advice anymore, but some of the words of wisdom I would bestow upon anybody who is asking me about becoming a trader, and this goes with investors as well. I'm always like, you always kind of have to temper your expectations. Like, we can all watch YouTube videos on how economics work and things like that. But the reality is firms on Wall Street have an entire armies of analysts and researchers, and they have access to tools and information that we don't have, and they're investing and trying to make the same decisions as we are. So it's kind of like you kind of have to realize your limitations as an investor as well. Because it's a well-known phenomenon that the retail investor were the last ones to get the bits of crumbs of information, after the firms on Wall Street have access to their insider info and their statistical models and their researchers and analysts. And these guys are the ones making pretty well-informed decisions more often than not. So, to kind of, when you understand that that's out there, you're like, well, maybe I'm not as well as equipped with my YouTube videos to be as educated as I think I am. So yeah, it does worry me that I think people have a lot of false confidence with their understandings. But again, anytime somebody wants to learn more about finance, I think it's a good idea.
All right. Sorry. So I'm trying to figure out how I'm going to frame this next question. All right. So we know it's not financial advice. None of this is a financial advice. This is research, right? This is not financial advice. So in your opinion, what would be, from an educational perspective, what would be your path? What would be your approach? What would be your implementation strategy for someone that's looking to increase their financial literacy, whether it's through blockchain or whether it's just from, you know, a general financial literacy education perspective?
Well, I would say you can educate without putting money on the line, right? Especially like when I was a trader, man, I was in social trading circles and groups and things, and man, people were putting their life funds on the line, you know, their life savings, and I watched people lose it all. And to that note, I've lost a lot as well trading. You know, made some, lost some, but I think you can educate without directly exposing your wealth. And then we've all heard the old cliche, don't risk more than you're willing to lose. So there are always demo accounts. Even with blockchain, you can always run things on testnet. You know, you don't have to hook up your live MetaMask with your actual Ethereum up to these DeFi protocols. Use testnet. If you want to get into trading, most exchanges will offer you demo accounts. It's called paper trading, or even there's a good argument about this against this, which I do agree with. It's if you don't have live money on the line, you're not going to have the same emotional and behavioral response to it. And I do agree with that. I've done a lot of demo trading in my life as well, and it's never the same. So I do think as well, like I guess moderation would be key when you are ready to take that step. Just don't YOLO your life savings in anything, really. You know, like whatever you can afford to lose is basically it, right? And I think people get dangerously over leveraged, especially in the cryptocurrency industry. So yeah, I mean, I would just have to say you just got to be smart about it, right? And don't falsely think that you're gonna be able to consistently outpace the Wall Street firms either, because I mean that's, you know, again, they're there for a reason and they're making billions a year. So you just keep your expectations realistic and just know that if you're looking to 100x your money, with the more risk, there's more, or the more reward, there's more risk, right? There's always that trade-off. So you have to understand things like that, and understanding leverage, man. I think Warren Buffett has a very hilarious saying, and I don't like to give the man too much credit because he's very anti-crypto, but he's got this one brilliant saying. He's like, the three things that'll ruin you in life faster than anything else are the three L's. And he says liquor, ladies, and leverage. And that last one, leverage, I'm like, he could not be more right. Leverage is a dangerous thing. So going back to like how, like, you know, gamifying education, man, get people to play around with a little bit of leverage on like a demo account, and they'll quickly see how bad people can get wrecked. It's brutal.
I actually like that a lot, because that kind of leads me into the next question, hopefully the last question, where we talked about gamification. We talked about gamification and you know, creating. So, you know, some of the things that we're thinking about in terms of gamifying this research, and that would lead to increased financial literacy, is things like leaderboards, right? Leaderboards to accomplish tasks and quests, to receive badges in like a like a soulbound token wallet, right? So you would have a soulbound token that would be a badge, because that is your badge, right? So it's a non-transferable badge, right, into your wallet. And I'm looking to think about, so we have, that's the gamification part, but then also with the game-based learning part, you know, how can we create a game, kind of like a sandbox game, if you will, right, with a storyline, and kind of integrate the two, right? You know, what's your thoughts on that? Do you think that this is going to be like a Web 2.5, where I'm just going to have like a website, like a Web 2 website with a dashboard to track everything? Or do you think that, you know, we're going to in the future see like a sandbox game, where you're building a quest in a sandbox where you can actually create learning type environments, as opposed to just, you know, a traditional game type environment in the metaverse? What's your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I think the possibilities are really endless, not to use an overused cliche there, but I think the badge system is a really smart idea. And I find it hilarious. You just reminded me of a friend I have here, and he's hooked on Duolingo, the app learning game. And you don't even really get any real rewards for that, but you get like a win streak. And he's so competitive. And every time we meet up, he brags about his day streak. He's done like 300 and something days, right? And and I don't even know if he really wants to learn a language. He's just like, yeah, he's like, I've got a 300 something day streak, and there's leaderboards, and he's competitive. He's into CrossFit, all this other stuff. So for him, the fact that there's a leaderboard, like you could teach the guy anything. You could teach him like quantum mechanics, as long as there's like a little bit of a competition and there's badges to win and there's a win streak. He'll pick up anything and learn it. And then as far as like a sandbox environment, I think the metaverse is really going to kind of open up the way that people learn in different ways as well. Because the really interesting thing about that is you can get, well, virtual hands-on experience, I guess. You can't really call it hands-on if it's in the metaverse, but I think most people would agree that the best way to learn something is by actually doing something, right? And when you're sat in a classroom, you're often not actively doing it. So, I mean, yeah, if we could get into a fully immersive Web3 scenario where people are actually in the metaverse and they are actually touching and experiencing and feeling, I think that would be far more valuable than, again, reading from a textbook. I'm afraid that technology is probably still quite a few years away from anything like that. But I think your idea of using blockchain to reward as well is probably a really strong motivator, because again, if we look at what's that game that all the kids go crazy for? They get skins for their weapons or whatever. And it's just,
Roblox. What's the other one?
It's one where they all like Fortnite. Yeah. And the game, and kids are absolutely hooked on that game, and they're winning skins for their weapons or what. I've never played the game myself, but it's proven to be incredibly addicting and motivating. And I don't want to say the word bribe, but if you put that into like an educational scenario, you can basically, we'll go with positively reward people for their efforts. But the cool thing is about if you're doing it in a Web3 is that's something that they actually own, and you can gamify a rewards mechanism in a way that they're going to own something forever, as opposed to something like Fortnite where there's nothing they can do with that skin outside of the game. I think if you can kind of build a multi-utility ecosystem around that as well. So say if they go through a course and they win a badge for that course, it would be, if that could have utility outside of that specific ecosystem, and maybe they could use it in other facets in other areas, then that will even motivate them even further to excel. I think that's a brilliant way to reward people for sure.
Excellent. I know I said that was the last question, but I lied. So given everything that we talked about, hopefully this is the last question, probably won't be, but given everything we talked about, what do you think would be the risks, drawbacks, challenges, or pitfalls into using blockchain to increase financial literacy?
Oh,
we didn't talk about this.
Well, yeah, no, I mean, I guess it would all kind of depend on the angle you take with it too, right? And the scope of what you're trying to roll out. So if we're talking about, are we going to put people in a classroom and teach them in person? Is it going to be done via, webcam on the computer? I think the drawbacks, I mean, I guess I can't really think of many other than, there's going to have to be like the gas fees and stuff to commit these online transactions. So that would certainly be one, especially if you're trying to reach underprivileged communities and things like that. So that's something that the school would have to sponsor or find a gasless mechanism. But really, I mean, if you had asked me this 2 years ago, I would have also said just hesitancy for adoption, people not wanting to let their kids waste their time with something like blockchain. But I kind of think we're past that now. And I think most people realize the utility of it. I mean, I'm sure you're still going to have some naysayers saying like, well, this is a waste of time. I think if you angled it more as blockchain, not as much crypto, because it's a bit silly, but blockchain is a revolutionary technology, and crypto is Dogecoin and Shiba Inu, right? And a lot of people kind of see crypto as being more of a speculative game that people play, really. But I think if you aim it more as blockchain, it sounds like, okay, it's learning something technical and useful. And I think a really huge pro of this that just kind of came to me is we know that people learn differently. Like I found out later in my life than I would have liked to, that I'm a very visual learner, and some people are more of a hands-on learner. And I think what's really interesting is if you're looking at teaching people with blockchain and Web3, I guess you can individualize the experience a little better per student. In certain different ways. So if you're going to be gamifying it, you can reward people for different types of behavior in a way as well. But man, you got me on this one. I'll have to send you an email, because there's got to be some drawbacks.
I couldn't think of a drawback, so that's why I asked you the question.
I'll be up thinking about it tonight. I'll be laying in bed and I'll be like, damn, but I'll take some notes. I'll definitely get back to you on it.
All right. So yeah, that's all that I had from my end. Is there anything else that you want to bring up on this conversation?
No, I mean, I think it's really exciting what you're trying to do. And yeah, I mean, I couldn't think of a better use really than using blockchain to educate. Well, I want to say educate the youth, but really to educate everybody. So yeah, no, it's brilliant.
All right. So Taylor, thank you. So where can everybody find you?
Hey, no, thank you for inviting me. So they can find me at the Coin Bureau. Obviously, the website, just about everything you see on there has my fingers in it in some way, shape, or form. And I'm also quite active on Twitter at Tayler. My name's spelled Tayler. It's a bit different. So it's at Tayler TBM. Oh, and LinkedIn, of course.
All right. Taylor, thank you once again. And for everyone else, until next time.
Great. See ya.